All right. Thank you, everyone, for being involved here today. Co-chairs are Chris Luth and myself. Uh, Earlier today, you heard about the Green Technical Work Group, and this afternoon it's the Green Storage Initiative. If you're on the East Coast in the morning, you're or another part of the world. Uh, what the Green Storage Initiative does is wrap programs, alliances, and funding models around the technical work group so that the technical specification be created and rolled out to the world. Our objective is still one specification that can be test once and report anywhere. And it's a challenge working with different regulatory bodies to educate them on the value of what the SNIA Emerald specification does and why you want to have fair and unbiased testing. And so a lot of work goes into the alliance work. A lot of work goes into the white papers that are talked about that are jointly created with the Green Grid. A lot of times it's a little bit confusing to say, well, what's the initiative doing versus what the twig is doing? And at this point in time, the majority of the work that is being done by the initiative is in support of creating the program around the specification. Years ago, we used to have a lot of other focus areas around energy efficiency and white papers and design specifications for data centers and so on. And we just don't have the critical mass to carry that out. So we're working on the most critical factor that the members want to have developed and ensured here by focused on the specification and having that adopted at a worldwide level. That reduces your engineering costs inside of your departments to make products sellable in all the different geographies. Next slide, please. Accomplishments is that back in 2020 we launched 4.0 specification as well as the tester kit. We ran the education programs for that, and then as those get rolled out and get cross-referenced by regulatory bodies, then vendors and independent test labs come back to SNIA for questions and clarifications. And so we continually provide industry support to anyone that's out in the industry. It's not just SNIA membership, but it's industry labs and regulatory bodies and even non-members of SNIA. Some of the ongoing work that we do in relationships is with the USA's Energy STAR program, the Environmental Protection Agency, and we've helped them understand what would be fair thresholds for minimum power efficiency metrics that should be met to be then listed as an energy efficient deployment. And that work took probably about 5+ years of data collection and then data analysis and architecture analysis. And then we worked that back through the EPA, and that was reflected in their launch of the data center storage version 2.0 specification that then went live this past year. We have an agreement with the Green Grid where they have a data center storage type of focus, and they primarily focus on regulatory lobbying and education, and SNIA tends to focus in on the technical nuts and bolts that go into that type of lobbying and education effort. And so with the reach of the Green Grid, who's a part of a larger organization, ITI, that relationship's important, and we've updated that alliance agreement. This past year, we did a lot of data analysis on idle disk drive technology. It was the platform that's behind the Japanese Top Runner program. It's somewhat analogous to the Energy Star program here in the United States. And we continue to maintain that program should be using active metrics along with idle metrics. And to this date, they only continually focus on idle metrics, and we've pointed out some pitfalls in the data thresholds that they're setting for regulations that go into effect in 2023. We're still in a back and forth discussion of what's the penalties to vendors that can't meet those thresholds, where no one in the industry can make them because the industry roadmaps for certain disk drive form factors and rotational speeds don't support the ability to get to those thresholds. Every year we cooperate with the Environmental Protection Agency, and we are a collection point for unit ship data. So if you want to be part of the Energy Star program, you have to submit to the EPA or through a partner to the EPA your unit ship data. What SNIA provides is, a sort of a firewall between the EPA and yourself, so that they're not micromanaging what your unit shipments are, and maybe coming up with future thresholds. So we tend to provide that as a way to anonymize data as we send it back into the EPA. Going into 2022, we're going to be looking at the test results that are being reported into the EPA for data center version 2.0 to look at the thresholds again. We have yet to set thresholds for foul IO. There's not enough data generated yet, but as the year progresses, we'll be looking at how's the threshold settings that we've defined holding up. As discussed earlier today in the twig, we're going to be looking at the SNIA Emerald 4.x or 5.0. Part of it's looking at test tools and what would make sense to roll forward for test tools that could be used for the next 5 to 10 years. What we've been working with for the last number of years has been VD Bench and Spec SFF 2014, and we have to bring the industry forward with tools that are currently in use and supported, and help the industry understand that when we change tools, what the correlations are of old test metrics are and the new test metric data would be. We continue to partner with the Green Grid for EU regulations and input. They partner with a group called Digital Europe, because EU only wants to deal with European specific bodies. And so that's how that relationship works, of how SNIA gets input into the European Union and their evolving regulations. Sometime this year, we'll publish an updated white paper, and then also have it translated into Japanese. And this white paper is pretty informative to regulatory bodies of what the expectations are in setting thresholds and test parameters, and what some of the technology roadmaps look like as they try to look at setting climate-related thresholds for data center technology. We are working on the investigation of storage device level testing and what those metrics look like. At minimum, we'll be creating a white paper this year and releasing it. What we're currently will be launching in the coming days is a survey to revisit the value proposition for the supply chain and regulatory bodies to have a similar kind of specification as SNIA Emerald, but focused in on the device only. And for the last 6 months, we've been validating a test tool, set of test workloads, and running both solid state and hard disk drive products through the test regimen. And we've been creating some good feedback of how do we want to move forward as a collective group of vendors to meet industry value propositions. And we're in the midst of working on the EPA unit shipment report for 2021, collecting 2021 data that will be published in the month of May. And that's what we're working on there. Just as a snapshot here is that the EPA does publish every vendor that does submit a report to the EPA that meets the thresholds for data center storage version 2.0. When we were under like version 1.0 and 1.1, there was over 200 plus test reports. At this point in time, there's just 48 test reports that are in place from 7 vendors. Some vendors were able to resubmit test data from the previous version of the test regime under data center storage version 1.1 if it would meet certain thresholds. This set of data that's behind this report is what we analyze when we're looking at thresholds. So there's a very detailed report that's in there for each vendor, and you can export the whole report with as a CSV file and then bring it into Excel and do a lot of graphing and charting work with that. Next slide, please. Just briefly, this is the roadmap that the TWIG has put together in conjunction with GSI. And some of the line items are specific to the programs that GSI brings together to work with the alliances and the white papers as we bring this roadmap forward. As you see, we have work that's going out into calendar year 2023 with the work that we're doing, and we need active volunteers at both the TWIG level and at the GSI level to enable this work to complete as scheduled and as reflected here. Next slide, please. So some of the major work items that GSI does is the technology and testing and alliance work. So we partner with SPEC for the file IO work, Oracle today for the block IO work, and SPEC for what power meters are eligible to be used as part of measuring the actual energy being consumed by a system under test, and so on with SFlow and 80 plus and putting together what your power supply efficiency rating is, where you probably have heard of bronze, silver, gold, and platinum type of power supplies. We work on policy-related work through the Green Grid and Digital Europe to affect the European Union, and through SNIA Japan for working through JETA, who works then with METI with the Top Runner program. And then interrelated is we do have participation in our group from SC 39 standards body. The version 3.1 of the SNIA Emerald specification is an ISO specification, and we haven't decided if we will take version 4.0 or a subsequent version through the ISO ratification process. Within SNIA, we have worked in the past with the SSM group to have profiles defined for instrumentation so that while a system is in operation, you can collect energy-related information. And then we've been partnering with the S3 technical work group on both the taxonomy that was done for NVMe, as well as what we're working on for this device level test specification to date. Next slide. We have a few companies that participate at the GSI funding level. Our dues are off to the right-hand side. Some companies choose to have their name listed because they're making certain bids in parts of the world where they have to show some level of support for green, especially if they don't have any test data out in the EPA data center storage report repository. We would need more companies to come forward this year with funding. We have two major programs that we're looking to fund, and they're not all done in-house with member labs and resources. At times, we do have to use funding to go to independent labs and independent consultants to do test validation work, as well as tool validation work with us. And so as we look to revisit which tools are being used in the version 4.x or 5.0 that requires some testing work to both in-house as well as out-of-house to make sure that whatever we specify, independent test labs have enough skills and capabilities to pick it up and work with those tools. If we're going to continue with the storage device level testing, we need to get more vendors testing and maybe some independent consultants testing to validate the methodology and architecture fairness of the test tool itself. These are the key players of the GSI. They're Chris Luth and myself as the co-chairs, and then we have two important contractors that spend most of their time inside of the Green Twig. Dave Teal is a year-round program contractor, and Patrick Stanko does a lot of our data analysis that gets spun up every time we have a point-in-time data analysis project to put forth. Next slide.
30 seconds to wrap up, Wayne.
Okay. So why get involved? This is a proactive program to stay in front of regulators. If you want to sit back and wait to see what the regulators do, you may be surprised that they've done something off the rails, and you're surprised and you're disappointed, and you'll penalize your company with incremental testing activities. This program is about being in front of the regulators, doing the test work, and then being able to give them quality test tools and methods that are unbiased against architecture that they can adopt. And then under the whole spirit of one test that's used worldwide, test once, report many times, instead of a test per geography that drives up your engineering costs. How to reach us to join? We're at the bottom of the screen.